Welcome everyone to Food Recovery Network's annual Roundtable Talk. We'll be talking all about our outcomes and our impact over the past year, as well as our learnings. And today is going to be a bit different if you've been to our Roundtable Talks in the past. We're also going to be featuring a wonderful panel here today, including a guest speaker, one of FRN's funders, Gina, with us here today. But first, I'll introduce myself. My name is Cassie, and I'm the Director of Development at Food Recovery Network. I've been on the team for just about 7 years now, celebrated my 7th year anniversary, and have been so honored to witness the growth and impact of Food Recovery Network over the past 7 years. And I'm calling in from my home on the central coast of California here today. So for those of you that may not be as familiar with Food Recovery Network, we just wanted to introduce ourselves briefly. We are the largest student-led movement fighting food waste and hunger in the US. And so in practice, we're mobilizing over 8,000 college students, food businesses, farmers, and community partners to recover surplus food that would have otherwise gone to waste and feed people experiencing hunger. And so in turn, we're both fighting climate change as well as addressing hunger. And I know we have a lot of folks representing from student chapters and partners all across the US here today. So thank you so much for joining us. Also, for those aren't as familiar, we wanted to share, a big commitment that we have is to trust and accountability and also transparency, which in practice includes these roundtable talks where every year we share our outcomes and our learnings in real time, and also just highlighting some of the certifications that we have. We're so proud to be a part of the 1% for the Planet Network, as well as be featured by some of the leading accreditation organizations here. And also, I just wanted to briefly thank all of our funders. I know we have a few of you on the call and many more individual donors not listed here. Wanted to thank you all for your amazing support just to financially support our work in moving more surplus food into communities to feed people faster. Also, shout out to Gina joining us here today, representing from EDL Northwest, one of our funders as well. So with that, I'll turn the conversation to Regina Harmon, our amazing CEO, and shout out to Regina, who celebrated her 10-year anniversary with FRN this year. So Regina, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Cassie, and thank you everyone from all around the United States who are listening in. And I'm just really honored to be here with Cassie, with Gina, with Katie, and behind the scenes, helping to ensure that this conversation runs smoothly is Sarah, our Director of Communication. So there's a lot that goes into having conversations like this. So I just wanted to make sure that we, as Cassie has already done, and I want to continue to do, have this air of celebration, camaraderie, and importantly, trust. So yes, Cassie mentioned I've been at FRN for 10 years now, and we've seen a lot of things. I've seen a lot of things over my tenure here at FRN, and this particular conversation is really going to hone in on some of our most recent learnings. We're really picking up a lot of momentum, and we've had our feedback loop, our learning loop into our programs for many years now, and so I'm really excited for today's conversation. Really quickly, what we're going to go over today, we have an acknowledgement. We want to go in an overview of our mission focus and our programs because, again, many of you are newer to Food Recovery Network. Many of you have known us for a very long time, but it's always great to have that kind of refresh. We'll also talk about the history of Food Recovery Network, and then importantly, our impact and analysis for our last fiscal year. We're in a new fiscal year right now that started July 1st. So we want to make sure that you have all of that understanding of what we were able to accomplish and the analysis that came from what we were able to accomplish. So today, it's about FRN's forward momentum. And I wanted to take a bit of time real quick to just introduce and have them introduce for themselves. You're going to hear a lot of voices today. So I wanted to make sure that Katie Jones, our incredible COO, has an opportunity to introduce herself before we dig in deeper into the conversation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Jones. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at FRN. And also, as some of you might have heard at the beginning, a James Madison alum. So excited to see them on the call today. And I've been with FRN for 5 years now. Looking forward to the conversation.
And I'm also so excited to have Gina Morris. Again, as we mentioned, Gina is one of Food Recovery Network's beloved and trusted funders at EDL Northwest, and we'll add her voice to our conversation. So as Cassie mentioned, we're doing something new today in our efforts to show that momentum, that transparency, our analysis. So Gina's going to add her voice. So Gina, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're so welcome, Regina, and it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you to everybody who is on the call. I'm a huge fan of this organization, and I'm really pleased to be supporting in this way. As Regina mentioned, I work with an organization called EDL Northwest, and we are proud multi-year funders of Food Recovery Network. And I'm excited to be here today to share the value that we see in this organization and why we think now is an incredibly important time to funnel resources their direction. So you'll hear more from me later on.
Great. Thank you so much, Gina. So I wanted to now go into a bit of history about Food Recovery Network's acknowledgement. We started having roundtable talk conversations about 5 years ago. Coincides when Katie joined the team. That's when, because of Katie's, efforts as our COO, first ever COO, working with the board, working with the staff to really harness the work of Food Recovery Network to understand, yes, our natural abilities, what we've been able to accomplish over the first 5-6 years of Food Recovery Network, but where did we want to go into the future intentionally? Where could we put our best efforts? And part of that, you'll remember, so not only did Katie join the team, not only did we put forward our framework, FRN 10X, because of the support of Katie, as I was earlier mentioning, it was also a time when George Floyd had just been murdered. Black Lives Matter became a rallying cry that maybe was new for some people. And it was a request that was not new for a lot of others. That was also a time when there was a lot of us who were learning more about the attacks that were happening on the Asian community. And we talked with our groups about that. How did we, Food Recovery Network, an organization dedicated to ensuring that people have the food that they deserve, what was our role in all of that, knowing that our framework has equity at the center? What could we say about these issues that we saw in our everyday world, even outside of FRN, inside of FRN? And we began to have an acknowledgement, really, truly about the land that we're on, and acknowledging that there continues to be racial disparities that are causing harm in our communities, down to the point of it's causing so much harm, people don't have access to the food that they deserve. So that's a bit of a timeline of acknowledgement that FRN wanted to put forward publicly. I felt very vulnerable 5 years ago when we first started to mention this. And over time, we just gained that strength. And then another important moment happened when Sarah, as our director of communications, joined the team, and she and I and the rest of the team, we really had a deeper conversation about the fact that our acknowledgement is a living effort, that through time, it changes, it evolves. And Sarah really, so why we hired Sarah, understood where we were coming from and helped to bring forward this acknowledgement that you see here today that takes into account that we are striving, we are trying, things have changed, some things remain the same. And so we have our new effort that we're putting forward for everyone here today. So I wanted to take a quick second to just read this acknowledgement, because I think it's so important to give that space to this. Food Recovery Network recognizes that food security, economic security, and climate justice are inextricably linked to racial equity, and achieving progress in any of these areas depends on addressing the root causes of these inequities. FRN is committed to racial equity and inclusion through all aspects of our organizational development and programming. We welcome respect, and encourage the contributions of all individuals, celebrating diversity of race, color, ethnicity, ancestry, national origin, religion, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, marital and familial status, language, mental and physical impairments and disabilities, military status, economic class, immigration status, but I'm gonna cry, foster care status, body size, criminal history, and other characteristics, identifiers that are often used to marginalize individuals and communities. We celebrate those things. Woo! We acknowledge the land on which we are headquartered. Our offices reside and are inhabited by the Kinwa. I'm going to say this so wrong. Pasca Set. I'm not even going to try. I just feel disrespectful at this point. I have looked so often, and I've said this before, to try to hear orally how the Piscataway Kanoi, which is the English translation, how they say and pronounce their name. I have yet to find it. So if anyone knows, please let me know. It's been a couple of years now. So they're also known as the Piscataway Kanoi, who are the traditional inhabitants of these lands and waters long before we all arrived here and continue to reside here. And we offer some ways to learn more about the tribal lands that all of our chapters reside on. So there's a website there. And we ask you to honor this beautiful land by joining us in committing to sustainability and promoting environmental well-being for everyone to thrive. And thank you all so much for joining us today to talk more about how the work of Food Recovery Network is helping all of these different communities thrive. They told us, we listened, here we are in action, in momentum. Okay, while I dry my eyes, wanted to talk a bit more about why we're here today. We believe deeply to our core that no one should be hungry. I know there's so many of our chapter leaders here who believe that too. No one should be hungry. That is the work that drives us every single day here at Food Recovery Network. And again, I know this will sound familiar to some of you, but just to anchor us into what does that mean for us to believe that no one should be hungry? How does that translate into the work of Food Recovery Network? So here is our mission focus, food waste and recovery. Again, our incredible chapters here represented in the audience, and behind them, thousands of student leaders who work tirelessly every single day, literally, to recover surplus food. And that supports our hunger relief. We work with over 330 nonprofit partner agencies to then therefore take the donated food and help feed people in their communities. It's hunger relief. And it's also climate action. When we throw away precious food, it goes to landfill, the number one place. And when we can circumvent that process that we've designed, we can help support an environment that works for all of us, a more sustainable, harmonious environment. And that's what we do every single day. And you can see that this is all combined, our climate action, our hunger relief, our food waste and recovery efforts. And then further in, what does that look like for us every single day? We have our awesome our college chapter students who are recovering surplus food. They don't eat it. We'll hear more about what that looks like. And in doing so, it dramatically reduces CO2 emissions from being emitted in the first place. And they're also advocating for a more equitable food system. Thank you all so much for what you do every single day. We also have our business and event food recovery. We call that FRV for short, Food Recovery Verified. This is how we work with businesses all across the United States to support them in creating their own food recovery plans, whether that's one location, whether that's events that are happening, you name it. There are so many places within our food system where we can recover surplus food instead of throwing it away. And we know that businesses want to be part of that solution. So thank you so much to all of our businesses all across the United States who know that they can do something better when surplus food happens all the time. We're going to hear a lot today about our Title I elementary school produce distribution markets. We are so proud of this work. And this has been such a wonderful and joyous way to get precious, fresh produce, fruits and veggies into communities that are most targeted by food insecurity. And we can talk more about the rationale behind partnering with Title I elementary schools, what it means to work within these specific communities, to go deep and to really hear from them how our programming can help address the issues that they want to solve for. So we're really proud of that. And so I know that moving forward, we're going to hear from Katie in just a minute to get more into that analysis that I had mentioned, but wanted to make sure that everyone saw here a snapshot of our community impact. So you'll see where we have our elementary school, our programming there, our FRV businesses, where we have our awesome chapters. And again, we'll hear more about our community college cohort. We're really proud about this work as well. We've been really able to infuse more food into communities hardest hit by food insecurity. Our annual report just released. And so in our annual report, you'll also be able to we'll read more stories about our community college cohort, and you'll hear more about that from Katie as well. Big snapshot. Since 2011, here's what we've been able to accomplish. I'm really proud of the fact that we just hit our 20 million meals mark that has been donated. That just felt like such a beautiful moment for us. So we've doubled our network not too long ago. We now have 8,000 student leaders, food system partners all across the United States. As we mentioned, we work with over 200 chapters. There's probably a recovery happening right now. Over 100 businesses have said, yes, we want to do the right thing with our surplus food. Those 330 partner agencies on the front lines. We have been hearing in the news, lines are long. Here in Washington, D.C., where close to where I live, where FRN is headquartered, there is a food bank happening right now specifically for federal workers who do not have enough food because they are trying to ensure that they can pay for their rent, that they can pay for their mortgage, that they can get their kids to their childcare, all of these things that they deserve. I just got an update in the state of Pennsylvania. SNAP is not happening right now in the whole entire state of Pennsylvania. So thank you so much to our partner agencies who are literally on the front line trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. Thank you so much. And so today is more snapshot of the things that we've been able to accomplish in our last program year. We'll get to that analysis in just a second with Katie. So our program year is July 1 through June 30. This is what our network has been able to accomplish. We added 41 new chapters. It's incredible. More chapters across higher ed means more food is being diverted into bellies and not into landfill. We had some awesome large-scale event recoveries, so cool. Our produce distribution markets are just doing wonderfully, and we can do more. So it's about momentum. We can do more. We know that the need is there. Look at what our college chapters have been able to recover, almost 1 million pounds of food because of our college chapters. And there's some really interesting analysis on that too. And again, please see the annual report as a supplement to what we're saying here today. But all of that CO2 that was prevented, when we think about our warming climate, we have to remember, in the reality of it, the environment that we have right now is the environment that we're going to have for many generations. Mother Earth is not a rubber band that's just going to snap back. So when we think about storms being more severe, happening sooner, lasting longer, this is the environment in which we will be living for the next several generations. And at this point, when we can prevent additional CO2 emissions from happening by recovering surplus food and making sure the 47 million people in need has that food, we can ensure that the environmental impact that we have right now won't get worse. We can ensure that we put that loving wall around the impacts that we've created. And then from there, hopefully some more solutions will come into place that will continue to further ensure that things can stabilize. And so the loving act of food recovery is vital to ensuring that our environment stays sustainable for all of us. All right, so we heard from Katie earlier, and Katie has been on our team for about 5 years, and so has brought so much skill and heart to the work of Food Recovery Network. A lot of the programming that you see here, Katie has helped us to elevate that, along with the whole team. Yes, absolutely. But I'm just so excited to have Katie talk a bit more about our analysis, and then later on be in conversation with Gina to provide more details to all of you. And please keep your questions coming. Please keep your comments coming. We want to make sure to hear from all of you. But thank you all so much for being here. And I'll turn things over to Katie.
Great. Thank you, Regina. And it's good to be with all of you today. So as Regina walked you through, this is a snapshot of everything our network accomplished last year. But I actually want to take us back a step to talk about how we even got to some of these metrics and some of the work that I'm going to talk about in a second, which is, as Regina mentioned, when I came on board, it was a very particular time in our nation's history, and we wanted to figure out how we could actually methodically center racial equity in our work. And so we used a framework from the Annie E. Casey Foundation called Results Count, which really helped us take a whole swath of data and put it together to say, okay, while hunger exists in every zip code, it doesn't exist equally in every zip code. So FRN, how do we actually prioritize our efforts in certain communities so we can actually feed more people faster? So while that previous slide, the snapshot, gave you an idea of what we produced, this slide actually tells you what our goal was last year, which is we established a baseline over the past 5 years or so that I was here, that we were already in 60% of our targeted communities. But what we realized was we actually had to increase our presence where it's most needed so we could actually move more food. And how we decided those communities had anything to do with, we used MIT's living wage calculator, we used SNAP, we used poverty, we looked at the census, like all different things to decide what these communities should have. So once we actually implemented our model, we could actually work on the ground faster. So this was our biggest goal, and I am delighted to say that we reached 78% of our goal, which truly it would have been 80%. There was just some paperwork things that wound up going into this next fiscal year. And one of the interesting things of now that we had more presence was it didn't just become about how we got chapters, it became about how do we actually activate our chapters differently and beyond their campuses within the communities that they're already in. And then that became the question of, well, where else can they recover besides campuses? What other infrastructure is actually present in these communities that also serves this kind of latent role of having a massive footprint with a lot of food and moving a lot of people at the same time? So as we looked at our data more carefully, what we actually saw was it was community colleges more often than four-year schools that were existing in the areas where there was a ton, well, literally tons of food waste, as well as many people experiencing hunger. And that's what actually led us over the last 2 years to launch our community college programs, and which we have several of our cohort members and our chapter members from community colleges on today. It's lovely to see your names, and I'm so privileged that I get to speak about the wonderful work that you're doing. And it was really interesting because the nature of community college students and the nature of four-year students are just fundamentally different. Community colleges are capitalized at a much different rate than four-year schools. Also, food insecurity is far higher at community colleges than it is at four-year institutions. And also, community colleges, the students tend to be older, they tend to be taking classes asynchronously. So the trans trans mm, people seem to kind of go in and out of community colleges more like a consistent presence at four-year institutions. So what was interesting was two big things that I wanted to mention. One was we had to actually start changing our chapter model to be more oriented to the administration rather than students, because the students kind of go in and out so frequently, but the administration at community colleges is what actually stays consistent. So if we actually want to build a food recovery program, how do we actually resource the basic needs office or the student support office in a way that can actually build this program? And secondly, because community colleges are resourced at such a different level, they also needed more money. Largely because there were students who were working perhaps at federal work study or different job placements. And while that paid a wage, it did not come anywhere close to what their actual expenses were. So we actually then gave anywhere from $2,000 to $15,000 to each community college direct general operating support. What do you need? If it is pans, if it is people, whatever you need, we are here to help you recover surplus food. And what was so amazing about that is once we actually resourced our cohort last year, you'll see on the screen here, they recovered over 187,000 pounds of food. But more interestingly than that, one of the community colleges was actually our top yielder out of all of the chapters that we had in our network. And so we are very proud of our community college cohort. And that's really interesting data for us, right? Like it's a proof of concept that if we actually work in more community colleges, we can feed more people faster. So then that also caused us to look at what this means for our network overall. And what's interesting when you look at our network overall, breaking down between four-year and two-year institutions, and then you can go to the next slide. Great, thank you. Is that while community colleges represent only 2% of our total college chapters, they recovered 20% of the food that we recovered last year. So again, this is proof of concept about how do we actually activate students differently, but in the communities where it's most needed. And one of the ways we do this is obviously, as I mentioned, the community college cohort. But to some extent, that is also community driven and us working in deep partnership with these community colleges for what they need. The other piece that we were seeing across communities when we were looking at our data was, again, what are the other educational institutions that, again, are in specific areas with a lot of food waste as well as a lot of need? And also, what are some of the systemic barriers that gets in people's way from actually accessing that food? And that's what brought us to our work with the Title I elementary schools in several communities across the United States. Because again, so often it's logistical in the sense of what time food distribution opens, where the food distribution is. So our thought is, what if we could actually bring food to where people already are at a particular time where they're already gathered? And how can we be far more targeted about where that food is moved? So we have piloted this work now in Atlanta. We currently have in St. Paul and Baltimore, and adding more and more schools that, again, we can bring fresh surplus produce into specific areas and communities and help remove so much of those access barriers to bring food where it's most needed. So that's just a little bit about how we're using our data and what we found in our data, and we're excited to continue to work and continue to share. So thanks so much. I'll turn it back to Cassie.
Thank you so much, Katie and Regina, for setting up the conversation for us here today. So with that, I'm going to transition to us. For those of you that have joined Roundtable Talks before, this will be a bit new. Like I mentioned, we're going to have a panel discussion here today with Regina, Katie, that you just heard from as well as Gina, our one of our funders. And so, Gina, I'll start it with you. If you just give you the floor, share a bit more about your background in working with Food Recovery Network and why you like to support our movement. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Cassie. And thank you, Katie, and Regina, for that beautiful overview of what you're doing. Um, I mean, at the highest level, these women are brilliant. So there's a reason. And I'll say more. And I'm sure there are people who are not women who work for the organization as well, but I always get the benefit of being with these brilliant women. So again, I'm here as a funder. EDL Northwest, which is the organization I work with, one of our goals for supporting organizations is to support the health and well-being of adults and children and also responsible sustainability of the planet. So Food Network clearly checks both of those boxes. I'll say more later about some more specifics further into the panel discussion. But what I'll say now is there are probably three key areas that made us really excited about Food Recovery Network when our organization was doing research and some due diligence about where we were going to provide some multi-year funding over a series of years. And one of them is the systems approach. And you've heard a lot about that so far. One of the first things I remember Regina saying in a conversation I had with her is, we see the lines as we're doing food recovery, lines at food banks, and one of the things that we have to acknowledge is that the lines don't necessarily get shorter. So just the idea that this is, as they have said, a really big interconnected system that leads people to the lines and to the lines not changing that much. So a small but powerful organization that can take that kind of systematic approach is very impressive. And so that the second, I'd say, general reason is the data-driven approach that Food Recovery Network has the capacity to take in looking at what's going on in the system and then how do we make some strategic decisions to channel our energy and effort there. And not every small nonprofit has that capacity to use and interpret data in that way. And their ability to launch very successful pilot programs, community college being an example, results from the capacity to be thoughtful with that type of information. And the third, but certainly not, these aren't in order, is the professionalism, the confidence, and the warmth. The combination of those skills that you feel from this leadership team that speaks volumes for their capacity and their ability to get good work done. And when you hear about the results and you experience the professionalism and you also know that the warmth is there, you can trust that that's what's going out into the community and the world as this work is being done. So 3 reasons for now, and I'm happy to share more later.
Thank you so much, Gina. That was very thoughtful and just appreciate your such the kind words and everything. And I will just say that ricochets into all the folks that we have on the call here today of just supporting the movement at large. And I know that we have a lot of students on our call here today. So to kick off the questions and the panel, wanted to ask, why is now the time to invest in our student leaders? And so Katie, I'll start with you.
Great, thank you. What I would say, and you can see some of it going on in the chat right now, students are really one consistent presence that exists in all communities now. particularly as so much funding is changing and social service organizations are closing, or now that we're seeing over the last couple of weeks, government organizations who are closed because of the furlough. Students are still in communities working every day to help provide and support those services and those partners on the ground. So the more that we can give them resources because they are still acting and moving in communities, the better.
Thank you so much, Katie. Regina, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, so students, you are, as you know, the future and such an important part of our world and our country. And from our perspective as a funding organization, providing the opportunity for students to be in service and connection with communities has always been important, and it feels incredibly important right now at a time when many of us are disconnected from each other and from what it does mean to be of service and take an approach to the society we live in that when everyone does better and has what they need, we all do better. So that feels like a very important reason to be supporting student-led movements in particular, because y'all bright, you have energy, you have amazing hearts, and you're smart. So to everyone on this call, thank you for bringing that to these chapters.
So beautifully said, Gina. I also wanted to share what Miles shared in the chat, which I appreciated. Community is our greatest immunity. I haven't heard that saying before, so appreciate you sharing.
Needs to be a
So,
bumper sticker or something, Miles.
I love that. That's such a great idea. Regina, curious to hear your thoughts of why now is the time to invest in student leaders.
You know, I always say, like, I've spent so much of my career working with people in college, even before I joined FRN, and I've been here for a long time. I just believe so deeply in the power of young people to hold us accountable, to remind us our future can be bright. And so when we invest in what they see, it makes us all better. And I have borne witness to that. I have seen that in my everyday life. You know, so working alongside college students, navigate classes, to figure out ways to recover food and all the things that go into that. You know, any of our student leaders on this call today could be like, okay, yeah, when volunteerism might be a little low, or when their material needs, pans, gloves, you know, these things that might be a little bit low, the ability to consistently problem solve, pivot, think outside of the box to get what they need, the resiliency, the tenacity, the love and kindness to do the right thing, even when no one is looking. When we can invest in more of that, it means that we remind ourselves that all of us are needed and are important. The most vulnerable among us, when we can support the most vulnerable among us, which is what our young people are doing, it helps all of us. So I want to be part of that.
I love that. Just wanting to be a part of it, a part of the full movement. So now I'll transition us a bit. I know we talked a lot about the numbers and the data and the impact, and Regina touched on earlier, you know, talking about SNAP. I know some folks chimed in on the chat. So let's shift the conversation to federal policy. How is federal policy, especially this year, impacting the work at Food Recovery Network? And Regina, I'll go ahead and kick it back to you to start us off.
Yeah, right. I got to take a little sip of my coffee here. I really appreciated what Katie said about the fact that we see so many different upheavals, and sometimes those upheavals come from our own federal government, and our students are still here saying, all right, let's get this food from our college dining halls to the homeless shelter that we love so much down the street, to the church down the street, no matter what is happening. Our resources through federal policy tends to wax and wane. The number of people who are food insecure has the lowest I've seen it since I've been here at FRN is 38 million people. And at that time, it was so egregious. And then it spiked to 54. And then it went back down to 44. Now we're up to 47. And I know that number is higher. And throughout all of that, our students had been steadfast, unwavering. People deserve food. So at the federal level, we have seen some really great wins. We have seen the expansion of the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Law from 1996. That was so long ago. And that update happened in 2023. And it has actually allowed us to do more food recovery in the form of our community refrigerators. It's been great. It has acknowledged our farmers. So when we think again about equity being at the root, a lot of times our farmers have been denied certain benefits because of a historic racism in our country, and that's a whole nother webinar. So that was an awesome win. Today, we are working. FRN's part of the Zero Food Waste Coalition. We are working on a new federal piece of legislation all around date labeling to ensure more food can be recovered and donated. 80% of homes in the United States get confused about date labels. So when we can standardize the language, and Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic has done a lot of research on this. What is the clearest messaging for consumers so that they don't unnecessarily throw food away when money is so tight right now? So we're not just talking about there are homes that cupboards are bare. They are. We're talking about their homes, and we're talking about homes of people who maybe haven't necessarily felt the burdens of financial insecurity, that still have certain habits of throwing food away for various reasons, but they need that food because of financial insecurity that is creeping up further and further and further into many more homes here. So when we can educate folks, have standard language, we don't throw away as much food. And then all the beautiful environmental benefits that come from that. So we are out here working with this 119th Congress to educate on the Food Date Labeling Act, the benefits of it. It doesn't cost anything to standardize this language. It can prevent millions of tons of food from unnecessarily going to waste. So that's what we're working on right now. The federal budget reflects something. Our policies reflect our decorum. Our policies reflect how we want people to be treated. And right now, our budget has taken away SNAP. And that's not like it was that much to begin with, but it did help round out for some people. It has taken away free breakfast for some children. It has taken away contracts for farmers that would feed those children. And so I go to the Hill to ask about constituents. How are they doing? Do they need food? If so, please know that Food Recovery Network is here. I talk about the Food Date Labeling Act. So we're doing a lot of things at the federal level right now, but we are working within a budget that has not prioritized feeding the most vulnerable among us. So again, I have to say thank you to our businesses, our students, who no matter what the budget says, we take our time to ensure that our extra can go to our neighbors who are experiencing food insecurity.
Thank you very much, Regina. Katie, I'll turn the question to you just to how federal policy is impacting the work of FRN, and then Gina will close it out with you on this question.
Sure. And one thing I just wanted to build on that Regina said when she talked about the fluctuating number of the people who are experiencing food insecurity. Part of the reason why it moved so much is during the pandemic, they actually changed what the threshold was. And so the 52 million was when they actually made it more of a living wage, in the sense of the number of people who aren't even earning a living wage. So that number went way up. And then once the pandemic waned, they readjusted to pre-pandemic levels. So I think it just underscores Regina's point of there have always been people experiencing hunger, and how we're choosing to measurement has differed based on who's in Congress and who the administration is, which I think will just say, from my point of view, what we do on the federal level has been in some ways even more well received because everybody needs a solution today about how they can feed their constituents today. And because of how we work and because of the student leaders on this call, we can provide a solution today that is in some ways incredibly cost effective, which is a very appealing message right now on the Hill. What I'll also say is federal dollars was never something that FRN pursued because of the really narrow ways that you're allowed to use that money. And we always wanted more flexible money, even if that meant that we got less money. And now, in particular, with our commitment to racial equity, even more of that funding is not for us. And so I think that's made us, again, very resolute in the fact that we are doing the right work where we need to be in order to feed more people faster. So while the environment has not necessarily been very supportive of our work, I do believe the communities in which we work have been incredibly supportive of our work.
Thanks, Katie. And I'll tag on from what I'm seeing in the funding landscape related to this. So this is the time of year where for our organization, end of year grants come in. We're kind of an October, November to October, November cycle. And every grantee has expressed either in the report or in follow-up conversations with me that the funding landscape has become incredibly competitive. We've talked about federal funding and how that impacts, but also private individual donors, foundation funding has become much more competitive because as people lose access to funds or are forced out, then they have to turn more to private funding. And that creates a lot of stress in the system for funding organizations that can get overwhelmed. And of course, for the organizations that are trying to continue their good work. So whether or not an organization receives any federal funding, there is still an impact, and the decision making trickles down in all sorts of ways. One group, I'll just give a brief example of another grantee that we work with in Los Angeles. They work in the juvenile justice system in Los Angeles County and do amazing work through expressive visual arts, mindfulness, giving young people who some of them have never felt worthwhile and able to make it in the world a sense of their own power and worth. That's what they do. That's what they want to do, and that's what they've been incredibly good at for 30 years. They are starting to look at models where they can make some earned revenue by making their IP available to other groups so that other organizations can do similar work in the juvenile justice system. Now, that's lovely, but coming up with earned revenue programming is not their core competency. Serving youth day after day and partnering with the Los Angeles County, with the juvenile justice systems, that's what their core competency is. They didn't go into business to profit off of their curriculum and what they're able to do. They went into business to do the work, and they'd rather give all that away for free to any other counties or juvenile justice systems that want to start similar programming. So all of that is to say that it impacts the energy and focus of nonprofit organizations to have to try to shift to other ways of making money. And the good news is a lot of them that are savvy and bright can, but it distracts from meeting the needs of individuals. So, for example, this organization would much rather serve a lot more kids than have to drop some time and energy out into figuring out how to make money off of their content instead of just putting the content out there and serving the people. So, that, from my perspective, I think is one of the biggest challenges right now for mission-focused organizations that do mission-based work. And I often think it's a misunderstanding sometimes on behalf of funders. And it's something I recently had to, explain to our board. Like, oh yeah, okay, great. Yeah, they're going to pivot. Maybe it's great. They'll find a way to make earned revenue. It's not why they went into business, and that's not really the purpose of the social sector and nonprofit work.
Thank you very much, Gina. That's really interesting to hear your side of the coin and coming from the funder perspective. So really appreciate you sharing that. And so my final question for us here today, and Gina, I'll push it back to you to start us off. What do you see as foundational to food recovery networks' forward momentum?
So, one of the things that we wanted to do as an organization is make sure that Food Recovery Network had access to multi-year funding. So many nonprofits, and those of you who work in the space, fund the space, know this, are hand to mouth year to year with their grant funding. So, kind of back to the theme of where these organizations spend time and energy. So, having to be really careful and on top of budget and expenses, also spending time reporting and re-reporting and reapplying for funds is energy and effort that could be put into feeding more people faster. And when you see the potential of an organization from the funder's perspective, like FRN, the best thing you can do as a funder is give them money and get out of the way. So we also provide general operating support because we believe it's our role to partner with an organization. We have some financial resources, but you have the expertise and capacity and understanding to serve the communities you're serving. So in order to support that forward momentum, I saw in my initial conversations and research into organization that there's the potential, there's the passion, and there's the progress. It was so obvious. So we have provided, I think, we provided 1 year first of just one-time annual support. And once we saw the amazing results, I tell you what, every year, Food Recovery Network's at the top of my grant report because I just go in alphabetical order. And I talked to one of the board members recently. I'm reading your report, but once again, I can't get past Food Recovery Network because they're so amazing. I'm like, that's great. I totally agree. And read the rest of your report. But that is, when you see that, that's the kind of momentum you want to keep going. So if they can have resources for 3 or 4 years that they can trust in order to focus more on growth and expansion, that's how we want to support them.
Thank you so much, Gina. Really appreciate your support and the support of other folks on the call as well. And Katie, I'll turn it to you, thinking about FRN's forward momentum, and then we'll close out with Regina.
So I would like to say thank you for the multi-year support, because for the longest time, people would talk to us about our strategic plan and they would talk to us about our long-term vision. And I said, are you going to provide long-term funding? And they said, no. And so I said, well, then when you provide us long-term funding, I'll talk to you about my long-term vision. But if you're interested in short-term outcomes, then let's just talk about that. So the multi-year funding has been transformational in the sense that now we can actually plan several years out, and we can actually allocate our ambition based on what we anticipate in our pipeline, which is a very different way than we've been able to perform before. So thank you very much for that. It has made all the difference.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And Regina, I'll prompt the forward momentum question to you, as well as just closing us out here, and I'll share my screen briefly as well.
Great. Just, for me, I get to work with the best team. Try not to cry. I really do get so overcome with how awesome this team is, because I feel so solid in my abilities, the abilities of everyone on my team, working together. They're just above the fold, awesome people. And I do think that, kind of some of the themes that we heard today, Food Recovery Network, we know that to feed more people faster, our commitment to feeding more people faster, we must be nimble. Our student chapters are so nimble in how they recover food, where that food is located, And as we grow in more chapters, as our programming continues to expand, we will do that. We will be nimble because this is a complex food system in which we work. And so how things get done on the ground, it really matters to be nimble. And I know that we had a question about, how we donate food and the safety of the food. And we have lots of language on that. So I just want to make sure that safety in our food recovery is top priority. But we have more information about that. And as has been mentioned, for everyone here, if it is in your budget to do so, we would greatly appreciate any donations that you might have, that you could make to Food Recovery Network. It will go right into feeding more people faster. And here's ways to be able to do that. And including, let's reverberate. This might not be something that you have in your budget right now, but maybe you know of others that it is in their budget. Please feel free to introduce us. You can do that through social media. You can do that through the wrap up that we're going to send it to everyone. We want as many people to know about Food Recovery Network as possible. So thank you so much, Gina. Thank you, Cassie, for moderating today. Thank you, Katie, for being an awesome COO. Thank you, Sarah, behind the scenes, for helping us organize this awesome conversation. Thank you all for showing up. We're all in this together, and it has just been so beautiful to be able to spend this time with all of you. And thank you to all of the future listeners. We really appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.